So thanks for joining up. We have a special guest today, Justin Shaw. He's with us to talk about how to improve your team's performance and accountability, which will help close more countertop deals. And with working with a lot of shops, we know this is a big issue. So we're excited for this. I'm not going to really go into that much. I'm going to let Justin just jump right in, do his thing, and you'll learn a ton. So enjoy.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Actually, this is my first time on Zoom webinar. So maybe if you just want to let folks know that have joined, if they do have a question during the presentation, is it the Q&A icon that they hit and then they log it in there?
Yeah, so you could do it both ways. We're also new to using Zoom webinar. It's basically like Zoom, it's just a little bit different. So one, we're recording this, so if you miss something, we'll sound out the recording. But the chat is open, so you can. Let me just make sure. Chat looks like it's good to go, and there's a Q&A, so you can also post a question in there. And whether Justin, if you want to get them to at the end or during it, do what you want to do. But yeah, you chat or the Q&A you guys can use.
Cool, great. Yeah, so if something comes up, drop it in so you don't forget, because yeah, we'll tackle the Q&A at the end. Before we jump in, just want to, I can't see you guys on camera, but would love to still be able to connect with you guys. Would love for you to just drop in the chat, and others here can also hear where you're from. So if you can drop in the name of your shop, what city you're in, into the chat, that would be great. And then I'll ask a couple of questions so I get a sense of who's here, and where relevant, I might tailor a couple of things, and I might actually call on a couple of people or one person, let's see, depending on who's in here, and how you guys answer the questions, depending on the time we have, maybe to workshop something live on the fly.
Perfect. So can you see the comments, Justin?
We can. We've got people coming
Okay,
in
cool. I'm going to
from
jump off and let you, like I said, do your
Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Walnut Creek. Awesome, guys. Excellent, excellent. What's up, Joel? Long time no see. Or can't see you, but thanks for joining, man. All right, guys. Also, as you put that in, because I do love to see where people are from, and I'm sure everybody else is, can kind of vibe with that as well. Would be interesting to know who here has a sales team. If you have a sales team, drop a number 1 in the chat. Still drop in your city and your shop name if you want to, or just the city. If you don't want to put the shop name, totally fine. So drop a 1 in the chat if you have a sales team, 2 in the chat if you're doing owner-led sales. Cool, awesome. So that's good for me to know. So that, the name of the workshop was Sales Team Accountability to close more countertop deals. But a lot of what we're going to be sharing can apply if you're doing owner-led sales. You just have to implement the systems for yourself, hold yourself accountable. And sometimes it's helpful to find somebody else in the company, even if they're not in the office, and they might be somebody on the install team that you're just having help to keep you accountable, because we all need that. And that's one of the main things here. All right, that's awesome, guys. All right, so we got a bit of a mix here. Some with sales teams, others that are doing a bit of both. And then we've got Karina, you're doing owner-led sales. Okay, awesome. All right, who on the call has received formal sales training before? Drop a 1 in the chat for sorry, not doing a good job here. A 3 in the chat, otherwise I won't know what you're dropping in for. A 3 in the chat if you've attended formal sales leadership training specifically, especially for those of you that have sales teams. Awesome. Okay, cool. Cool. All right, and then also something that's helpful for me to gather that info is, what is your current sales? And then what's your sales target? So we're closing in on the end of the year in Q4. So first off, your target sales that you had for 2024 versus your current. And then a lot of this that we're going to go through will help to move the needle to close this year out strong. So if you're okay with sharing in the group, go ahead and drop that number in. going to move a few windows around, guys, while you do that, just to save a little real estate here. All right, no problem. If you guys don't want to disclose that information, totally fine. What would be helpful also is to get a sense of what your biggest challenge is sales-wise. So if you want to drop that in, just keep it short, drop something in, that would be super helpful. And Steve and I collaborate in other ways quite often, likely to host another workshop like this in the future. So information that you guys give us here will certainly help to get a sense of, well, what might be, an important topic that you guys would want to dig into at a later date. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So, okay, I was going to say nobody should be on this call if you're not having sales challenges then. All right, biggest issue is to make people understand we do very high quality work. You mean your prospects? Okay, cool. Stephen will maybe be able to download the chat after and that stuff that maybe we can dig into.
Yeah, for sure. I'll get a list of that and we'll kind of save it, look at it. I was also going to just throw in that for the shops we work with, I think a big sales challenge is just, again, sometimes just simple sales tactics, like when to follow up, how often, all of that, like basic sales stuff. So we see that often with some of the shops we work with.
Okay, cool. For the clients we work with in our program, we actually just provided them like a healthy pipeline protocol. We won't be covering those items here. If you remind me at the end, Stephen, we do have a bonus at the end. So
okay.
people,
yeah, I'll put that in the notes here.
Remember to include it with that. That'll be cool. All right, guys. Awesome. Appreciate you guys giving me some intel there. And then we'll go ahead and jump into it. So let's just make sure you guys can see everything. All right. So we've got about 45 minutes. Is that right, Stephen? We kind of burned a little bit of time at the beginning.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you do your thing and, we could, stay on a little bit after if we have to, but.
Okay, 1 minute. Hang on. Well, I want to make sure we got enough time for everybody. So, all right. I just ticked it down a little bit, 32 minutes to keep me on track, guys. With that in mind, I thought I'd have a little bit longer. Thanks, Joel, for putting that in. Biggest issue is our pipeline not having enough backlog of ready jobs. Okay, yeah, sort of a larger, more complex problem. But that's awesome. Awesome to get that intel from you, and hopefully we can jam on that in the future. All right, so real quick, I'll let you know, because I've got probably 10 minutes less than I thought, because I do want to leave enough time for Q&A, is I'll probably talk a little faster than I normally would. I'm Canadian, so I'll probably say a bunch of times in here. Hopefully that's cool with you guys. And we'll get going from here. All right, so really quickly, guys, the agenda for this call, if you happen to only scan the information that came out from Stephen, is we're going to be covering improving efficiency, a mechanism for accountability. We're also going to talk about what to measure and some creative ways in which to both drive accountability and also to really get your team excited about the things that you're measuring. And then we'll finish off with the Q&A, guys. All right, cool. I see some more stuff coming in here. Super helpful. Thank you, guys. All right. I think in the chat, I mean, you can put it in either place, but if you do have a question later, probably use the Q&A and then we can just separate those two and it'll keep it nice and clean. All right. I know some of you guys are likely to jump off and not have time to attend this whole thing. And so there will be a recording and a replay. I'm not going to bore you with an intro to myself if you're not familiar with me yet. But if you do want to look me up after, you can go to either of these sites, stonefabricatorelite.com or justinxshaw.com. Stephen told me that would be a good idea, because not everybody can make it. Oh, sorry, guys. Lost that there. All right. So the other thing that I'll share with you guys as we jump into the agenda is that if at any time you're sitting here saying, man, I'd like to get help with some of that to dial in my sales, Stephen will have a link to my calendar that he'll drop in a little bit later into the chat, and you can just grab a time with me to talk about what that could look like for your company. So we'll make that available, because we won't have time for you to have direct access to me here. All right. So just going to close the chat window now, but Stephen will save those. All right. So first off, let's talk about the problem so we can kind of all align. And if you guys have things that you want to add, or you don't think that's the problem that you're having, totally cool. Feel free to drop that in the Q&A. We can hit that later. But the problem after 7.5 years of working with shops that we see is that very often there's a leaky sales pipeline that they're dealing with, where as a result, you're missing a lot of opportunities, which really results in leaving money on the table. And often we can hit our sales targets without having to spend any more on marketing if we were to solve for some of those things. And speaking of marketing, and one of the reasons that Stephen wanted me to join this call and share some of these things with you guys is that a lot of his clients are struggling to really stay on top of the leads, right? Some clients might be getting 100 leads per month, but in many cases, they're not following up with the leads at all. And as a result, we're really burning a lot of money. It can be very discouraging, to spend money on marketing and not capitalize on it. And it's really going to limit your ability to grow at the rate that you want to. It's going to end up slowing you down. Very likely, you're not going to be able to consistently hit your growth targets. All right. Now, the other thing I do want to talk about, the other problem that we often hear about from shop owners, and if there are any sales reps on here, don't take it personally, not to knock you. This is just some of the very common things that we run into, is that the shop owners will say, I have a team that's more like order takers than sales pros. And, one of the things I like to think about is, we have to take ownership of that, in that they need to get the right training, the right development. And then it's often, where the gap is more on the systems and the leadership side of things. And we have to take ownership of that in order for our sales reps to be able to execute like pros, right? Now, so much of what we hear, because there was a period of time where we worked with sales reps of stone shops for 3.5 years through a program that we called the Sales Sidekick program. So we were working very closely with a large group of shops with a ton of sales reps and collecting a lot of data through that and really figuring out what some of their biggest challenges were. And often due to, lack of proper time management, they're not focused on the right tasks that are really going to move the needle and impact the bottom line, right? Getting stuck in doing a lot of admin work or the things that are, the new shiny object, right? Showroom walk-in, right, is the easiest thing to work on and get distracted with that versus, going into your pipeline, auditing it, following up with deals that you need to reactivate, things like that. And then we hear time and time and time again that I'm just too busy, and very often, and that's a whole separate conversation, but just being bogged down by admin work is often what we hear, and we have no time, and I'm too busy to focus on sales. The other challenge that we hear about a lot is that the business owners have a lack of visibility on the metrics of how their team's performing. Or in your case, if you're doing owner-led sales, you even have a lack of visibility of how you're doing yourself, right? And a lack of visibility of how things are going, and to be able to access that in real time so that you can hold your team accountable more quickly instead of waiting until that shows up in your bank account as to how you're doing. So what's the solution? What we're going to dig into today is three, because I want to keep it really simple and actionable for you guys, are three keys that we've found to be extremely effective in improving your sales team's performance. Now, a lot of the things I'm going to go through are not things that are going to be earth-shattering. Often we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And so a lot of these things you're going to be familiar with. But if we do have time at the end in the Q&A, I would love to jam with you guys on some of the unique creative mechanisms, I like to call them, that really allows you to change habits, because it's behaviors and habits that often stop people from using the systems the way they're designed to be used. And so you can have the best laid plan, the best laid systems, and nobody uses them the way you want them to. So that's really kind of the secret sauce. But the three keys are, number one, it's a time block. For the daily, we call them MITs, most important tasks. Those things that are going to impact the bottom line, right? That are going to generate cash flow, which is the lifeblood of the business. And what are the other crucial areas of focus? So for your sales reps, that might be new business development, account management, estimates, for example, but having very specific times to do each of those things so that you're not context switching, you're not multitasking, and you can just focus on a single task in a defined amount of time. And ideally, you plan the week in advance, because the name of the game is to win the week before it even starts. All right, so we'll get into that. And then one of the mechanisms I'll share with you right off the top is the bookend mechanism of how you and or your team opens and closes the day to give you the best chance of success for what happens in the middle of the day. All right, and then we're going to talk about utilizing and installing a visual scoreboard. So there's a lot of transparency to track performance and everybody's on the same page. And gamifying this, celebrating and recognizing and rewarding wins. And I'll share a really quick recent case study with you guys of that and how it was successful and what the results were. All right. If you guys already have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I've just got to switch things for 1 second. All right. So I will let you know, because a couple of you have, I've spoken to you guys before, that what I'm going to be diving into right now is part of our flagship 90-day growth engine program, really designed to help you going from feeling like you're held back from getting to the next level to having the right systems and leverage to drive significant growth. And what we're going to focus on today is really in our systematized phase, building a sales engine. So that's the part we're going to jam on today. But I'll have Stephen just drop into the chat, because if anybody does want to discuss what we go through, what we're going through here, and kind of wants to talk about the other parts or how to apply this in your business, you can book a call with me. I've opened a few spots, and there will be a bonus for the first 3 people that do end up taking me up on that. So we'll drop my Calendly in there. In case, again, you jump off and you're like, how do I get a hold of this guy? All right, cool. So back to it. Let's talk about the results. So I want to lead with that case study first. So you're like, okay, this all sounds very simple, but what's that going to do for me? Why is this important? So the reason that I'm sharing this specific case study is that it's the most recent. And even though you guys are going to see, wow, that's in pounds, is that we do have a program member, and it is the most recent success story of them implementing this. And they're based in the UK. They're on the smaller side, and they don't actually have a sales team. Prior to working with us, they felt that sales was nobody's job. That business would just come to them and it just happens organically, and they just fill the orders. They didn't call them that, but that's, along the lines of the order taker kind of dynamic. So the reason I share this specific case study with you is if it can work for those that feel that they're not salespeople, and even some of you that are doing owner-led sales may feel like, hey, I'm not a salesperson, I just have to do this, then it should be able to work very well for those of you that do have a sales team, right? Okay, so as you can see here, a bit of a rough year for them. Their sales goal was 75K, I believe. I'd have to look at this again. But their estimates have been really, they fell off a cliff at the beginning of this year and have sort of plateaued through June, July, and August. September, you can see the increase of up to 66%. And the jobs as a result of implementing this nearly doubled. And I should mention from a team that the number one challenge the business owner felt was they would have a lack of buy-in into installing these systems and this approach. He was getting a lot of pushback, and we did find unique mechanisms to overcome that. And some of those, hopefully, we'll be able to jam on that with you guys here. And they hit their sales target for the first time this year. So sales here, not able to hit, to finally being able to hit it in September. And this is something he sent to me in WhatsApp, which actually made me emotional because we worked really closely with him. He sent me a video and they were literally updating the visual scoreboard, which we'll go through, and jumping for joy. And that was a major transformation for him, from going from feeling like he had a total lack of buy-in from his team. They would just roll their eyes when he would try and introduce new things, to really being able to get the team excited, jumping for joy genuinely when they hit that goal and bought in. All right. So with that in mind, would encourage you guys, feel free to, grab a notepad, take some notes of the things that resonate with you, ask questions, because we can, jam on that later together, and let's jump into it. All right. So the first thing we call the high performance week. We want to improve time management and prioritize what really matters. So also, Stephen, if the group wants, and people can drop into the chat, let's say the number 4. Don't think we've used that yet. If you want a copy of this presentation, it has worksheets in it. So you'll be able to go through and work on these things on your own. All right, so the first thing you're going to tackle when going into designing your high performance week is you really want to establish what are our non-negotiables, right? As a sales first, and that's a big thing, as a sales first company, right? We put ourselves first, not always at the whims of the business, where when an interior designer wants to change something or somebody wants to dig through some remnants, you drop everything and that's what you're focused on. We're a sales first organization. So what are the non-negotiables we should be focused on in order to operate as such? So when we're talking about those types of things, we want to think about and brainstorm what are the things that we would be doing daily and weekly. And then once we brainstorm that out, what are the things we're going to commit to? And that's a big part of this. And that was a big part of the transformation for that client, is the commitment. Till you get the commitment, the results are not going to be there. So just a really quick example of what this would look like. Let's say you brainstormed here and here, and then you're wanting to be like, okay, these are the things that reasonably we can commit to that are going to have the highest return for us. We need to have a daily huddle. We need to have an end-of-day report, and that's what we'll go through with you guys. That's an option, one option of what a bookend would be, how you start and end your day, right? Daily huddle, end-of-day report. We also want to do a very quick 15-minute, let's say, daily CRM audit. Doesn't take very long, but that's something we should do daily, right? So we don't leave money on the table and we don't have a leaky pipeline. All right, cool. So that would be the 3 things we'd put on our daily. And then some examples would be a weekly CRM audit, account management, prospecting, weekly planning, and some time to work on long-term projects so we don't lose track of them and they always get put on the back burner. All right, so that's a quick example of that. And then, although overly simplistic, you really do want to do this with your team. There's mechanisms, though, that you'll need to have in place to keep them accountable, right? Is you want to time block this. So if you guys do want the worksheet, go ahead and let us know. We'll give you the whole thing, the presentation, and then you can break this down with your team. Because if you have 5 sales reps, you want to coordinate who's going to be available for walk-ins, who's going to be able to, see showroom appointments. So you've got to play a little bit of Tetris, so to speak, and make sure that your schedules align, right? So it's just a good practice to break this down. But you can see here that you're going to break down things like daily huddle at the top. Okay, that's going to happen there. Your weekly team meeting. You've got time for your CRM audit, end of day reports here, and then your weekly planning and scorecard update. All right, so the name of the game here is you don't want to micromanage your team. You don't want to have everything in here time blocked. You really just want to put in the non-negotiables that no matter what happens in the crazy day and the chaos of the business, these things get done and you're compounding consistency, right? That's the name of the game. So you want to have a fair amount of open time, free-flowing organic time, right? That's important. And so make sure you see a healthy amount of white space when you do this. All right. I'm going to keep moving here because I see the clock and I got a little less time than I thought. So if I turn into an auctioneer, I apologize. I'm going to talk quickly. And then the next step is you do want to install this in your digital calendar. And although that sounds self-explanatory, a lot of you guys use a CRM. People can book a showroom appointment in, and you don't want them to be able to book in with you if you've got that important time where you're doing prospecting, for example. And instead, it would rotate to the salesperson that is available for that, right? So it's just good to systematize this. It's also good when you do this consistently enough to see, okay, what was working, what's not working, how long does something take, and shift things around. So when you do this in Google Calendar, your whole team can share their calendar with each other, and then you can see when other people are free and available. Quick pro tip for you guys for efficient communications. And so you're not having tons of drive-by meetings where somebody knocks on your door, hey, can I just talk to you for 5 minutes? And it's an hour. Just have one slot that you're available for meetings, or 2 slots. That's the time people can book in with you. Otherwise, I'm working. So think about that and put it in your calendar. But let's keep trekking. Hopefully this is good stuff for you guys. I'm going to open up the chat so I can kind of see here. Hopefully this is valuable. Please go ahead, just drop into the chat a number 5 or your favorite emoji. Just let me know if this is valuable at all. Thumbs down if it's not, and hopefully I'll pick it up in the second half if I get a bunch of thumbs down. Then we'll have some more good stuff for you in a minute. All right, cool. Thank you. Thank you for dropping that in. All right, so bookend mechanisms, guys. That is so that you can win the day by the way you start and end it. And all of these things are connected, right? It's connected in the high performance week of how you schedule things, and it's going to be connected in how you're getting the metrics and the data you need for transparency and visibility to track what's working, what's not working, what to do about it in real time, and to keep people accountable. So for the bookends, again, if you want the worksheet, make sure we'll drop it in. Stephen is going to grab, the specific users, and we'll send it out just to those people that want it. So you're not getting a bunch of junk from us in your inbox. You guys will get this worksheet if you want it to go and develop your own unique bookends. I don't recommend necessarily just doing the ones that I'm going to share with you, because often you're going to know what the biggest constraints are that you have, and the personalities of your team members, and creativity is going to be your friend here. So you're going to want to look at, okay, what are the things that we want to focus on for the start of the day? And the framework that we would use is start of the day, what are the KPIs? So if your biggest constraint right now is, hey, we're not doing enough outbound calls, we just wait for things to come to us, we're not picking up the phone enough. Okay, your start of the day should have that KPI that you guys are talking about, or you've got a start of day report, or whatever that format is, and we'll talk about that in a second. So that's just one example. So you'd go ahead and you would write that in. So it'd be like, oops, sorry guys, outbound. Oh, my bad. Pen size is too big. Bear with me, just imagine that said outbound. Okay, cool. So we want to focus on number of calls, like how many walk-ins did we get, right? And that would go there. All right, so the things that you guys want to focus on are KPIs, and then MITs are the big 3 is what we call them. So your most important tasks, or the big 3 things you're committing to, or your team members are committing to that day, that's really going to move the needle. All right, so. And then I would generally have something, if you're really focusing on being sales driven, of a pipeline focus. And then what are the blockers? What is preventing us from being successful in the areas that we're prioritizing? And then we typically, another quick pro tip for you guys, is have our team members apply, and you guys are probably familiar with this, it's making its rounds, called the 1-3-1 method. That when you identify one blocker, you have that team member come up with what's the one problem, the 3 solutions, and their one recommendation. That's a great way to approach it. So you give people a sense of ownership over the problem. And that's how one step towards building people that have a sense of leadership. And it also helps you from helps you to keep your meetings very short. So you're not just brainstorming on a problem, not a lot of crosstalk, right on the spot, 2 minutes, let's solve it. And so we really match it up to be just the same thing on the other side, okay, for the end of the day. Now, the way that we found, the thing that makes this successful, is the actual mechanism itself. And I'll jam on this in a minute. And for those of you that want the worksheet, when you actually click on these red links, those are Google Docs, and it gives you the template, and you can go ahead and just use those to build out your own. But if we jam on bookend mechanisms for a second, I'll give you some different examples. The ones that are here is a start of day huddle. Nothing revolutionary there, right? You guys have probably heard about them or used them yourself. Now, the other one, an end of day report, you've probably also heard of that as well. Now, the ways in which we've gotten creative with that is, for example, we had one shop that was really struggling to get their team to be accountable, to really move the needle in the areas that were most important to him. And they were also not filling out the end of day report. And so they said it would take too long. And they're like, okay, that's strange. There's only 5 questions on there. But instead, before you leave the office, your end of day report will just be to text the business owner the 5 things. So it's super fast. Now, the downside to that is we couldn't have it tie into, an overall scorecard where the form would populate in a Google sheet and you'd have a running total, but baby steps. So we had them text the business owner because he was really wanting them to do outbound calls, really wanting to get a sense of how many walk-ins they were getting, how many showroom appointments, how many leads. And this was really important to him. And he really wanted to move from that order taker, sort of dynamic. And so the outbound calls was one of the most important things to him. We came up with that idea to have them text him, and overnight it transforms, the sort of the dynamic and the accountability. Not having him need to babysit them and handhold them. You can imagine that sort of feeling if you're a sales rep of having to text your boss, 3 days in a row that you didn't make any outbound calls and you're going to text him 0. It moved the needle in and of itself. So that's where I want you guys to apply creativity to this as you start to implement these things. It's like, hey, what's really going to have somebody sort of have that feeling that there's a consequence, or, carrot on the stick, either consequence or reward that's going to have them actually use the systems that you want them to adopt. So that's really the key there. But as I see that we've got 8 minutes left, I want to keep cooking. So we'll keep moving here. Creativity is the name of the game. All right, down to what to measure. And hopefully I'm not going too fast for you guys, and that's cool right now. What to measure. What are the most important metrics to track? And what I would say is less is more when you start. Don't need to track 100 things. You want to track the most important key performance indicators, or KPIs, and really the biggest levers, the things that if you increased that by 10% or up or down, it's really going to move the needle for you. And again, consistency, really tracking it for long enough that you're able to see the impact in your business. So I'll just go over 8 so that we keep it really, really simple, and we'll just talk about them very quickly here. All right. So first off, sales targets. And I know that's crazy that I just put that on there. It should be self-explanatory. Or let me back up for a quick second, just so I set the table on what I define as sales drivers. Sorry, skipping this step here. I define that as the key factors and the activities in some cases that are going to directly influence sales and results. And these measurable components, you could say, that when you optimize them will drive growth significantly, like you saw in that quick case study of how much we moved the needle. And that was, in 30 days. And so tracking and improving these sales drivers helps to ensure that your team has a focus on the right actions to meet their targets. And we start with sales targets because I've talked to enough shops that actually don't have a sales goal. Probably is not the case of the people that are on this call, but I've definitely heard it more than I'd like to. So make sure you have a sales target. Make sure everybody understands that yearly, quarterly, monthly, and the keys there then are weekly and daily. So you want to just break it down. So that way, again, you're not waiting till it shows up in your bank statement. In those end of day reports, in real time, you're seeing, are we on track, off track? What are we going to do about it? The end of the week, we can see on track, off track. What are we going to do about it? It's a lot easier to know in real time what we got to push than trying to throw Hail Marys at the last week of the month to push things across the finish line. All right, so next thing you want to know is your average deal size. And if you're using a CRM, which many of Stephen's clients are, you guys that are on here, you want to get a sense of your average deal size. And so for many of you guys, that might be in the range of 4 to 4.5K when you run those numbers. Is often what we see. You get some really small ones, you got a vanity, and then you've got a 25K project, and then you've got an entire home with, wall cladding and a custom fireplace. The average, let's say 4.5K. And then you want to know your conversion rate, which I will say often people significantly overestimate what their conversion rate is. And I see I got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to have to hustle. And then pipeline coverage. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's essentially what's the total value in our pipeline. And if we account for our conversion rate, that is like, okay, let me just break it down math wise. Sorry, I'm rushing a little bit too much. Just to give you a really easy example. If you're trying to hit 100K per month, then your conversion rate, you could estimate, we need to have 3x that represented in the value of our pipeline so that we know if we convert at the rate that we think that we do, the math will be in our favor, that we're going to be able to hit our sales target. All right, so those are the top line. I won't be able to go through these too much more detail. But basically, when you start to reverse engineer these things, that's going to help you to really get a sense of what are you trying to keep your sales team on track with and accountable with. All right. Now let's dig into lead measure metrics, and then we'll close this out with the last part here of the visual scoreboard. And that was really one of the things that moved the needle the most for that case study that I shared with you guys before. So lead metrics, really quickly to define those, that's the measurable either factors or activities or indicators related to how potential customers, your leads essentially, that when managed properly in your sales process are going to see that you're able to hit your goals. All right, so we'll start with the number of leads required, right? So you can then reverse engineer up to your sales target and your average deal size. So leads required in a given month. And so that's where your marketing is coming into play. Speed to lead, all right? That's how fast we're getting back to a lead. And so if that's one of the biggest levers that you optimize for, this alone will help you significantly increase your sales. So, and that's one of the things that when I showed you guys that slide of just lighting money on fire, if you're doing marketing and you're not getting back to leads in a very rapid time frame, you're very likely to lose them. And that's when you're like, oh, I don't get a hold of these leads. They're junk. Not necessarily. It's just that your competitor got a hold of them and now they no longer need you. And so they don't need to pick up the phone. You want to also track number of touches. How often are we touching these prospects to follow up with them? How many, what time frame, what cadence, and how often? And again, we'll include in the bonus that we'll be dropping or sending out to a few people that do end up taking us up on that protocol for a healthy pipeline. And then deal velocity is the last thing I really like to track. And that's how fast a lead or opportunity is moving from closed won or closed lost. When they enter your pipeline and your sales ecosystem, how fast do you know that they're lost or won? And that's really, really important because we're often seeing that sales reps will spend far too much time chasing leads that aren't qualified, or just letting them sit in a pipeline that then is just too bloated to really know what to focus on. So you want to move things through quickly. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap this up with the visual scoreboard, and then hopefully we have a little bit of time to jam on Q&A. Hopefully people are dropping some questions into here. If you guys are not, because sometimes people are literally driving to a job or doing a templating. We've had that. They're templating while they're on this and they can't do that. Stephen could maybe help out by asking some questions that he knows that his clients always have. Visual scoreboard. So what this means to me is you go onto Amazon and you find the biggest whiteboard you can find that will fit in a highly visible place, not just to your sales team, but to everybody, because it matters. Visibility here is key. All right, so you want to find the biggest whiteboard you can, and then what to include on your scoreboard. Less is more. So I advocate for including what I call your MIGs, so your most important goals, and you usually don't want to have more than 2. So that would generally be what's our monthly sales target. And then, for example, if your other most important goal is trying to bring down your callback rate, then include that too. Your callback rate. And so those are the 2 big metrics that the whole company is aware of, being accountable for, and optimizing for. And so you'd have your sales target, versus your actual and what the live number is in real time. And for example, in your daily huddle, you have your team go up and update that daily. It's very powerful when you have your team updating that daily. That in of itself helps to keep people accountable when they see that. It's not out of sight and out of mind. And then the leading indicators that you come up with in that brainstorming sheet, right? The number of leads we need. And so it's reverse engineering from the goal. How many leads do we need? Appointments, walk-ins, quote sent, outbound calls, etc., to hit that target so that we can see on a daily basis, is the math going to be in our favor? All right, we hit timeout. Well, right on time. Managed to do it. All right, guys, I would love a quick, actually, if you can, or if Stephen will have you guys do that, a quick unmute, and you guys can just shout out if you found that valuable, or just clap if you do, one-time clap if you found it valuable. That'd be super helpful, just to kind of bring the energy back into this room, and then we'll go over the next part real quick.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I have a couple questions, but I'll wait for a minute. If you want to ask a question, I think you have to raise your hand. I see Nicole. I'll unmute you.
Okay,
If you
cool.
want to ask a question here.
We'll jump into the questions in just a minute, guys. I do want to wrap with just one quick thing, and Stephen, then we'll do that.
Sounds good.
I often made the mistake where I'd be on workshops like this, and I would just go jam right through, and people will be like, well, how do I get help if I want help? So I do want to just let you guys know that. And so Stephen can just drop that link in the chat to book a time with me. And there will be a bonus for the first 3 people that do that. We'll send the bonus out, and I'll go through that in a second. But the 90-degree growth engine, we cover all of these things. And I want to let you know that right now we zoomed in here. So you guys should have a sense of your sales engine, just the basic things you want to start with. If you're working with Stephen right now, it's a very good chance you've gotten your marketing machine foundation taken care of, and that's great. But then we do have, a fair amount of other areas that you may be curious about, your competitive advantage, how to really drive and amplify team performance, how do you create a game plan to hit your goals in a number of different areas, and how do you really systematize the business? I'll just cover a couple of things. If that's interesting to you guys, Stephen will drop that in the chat. You guys can book a call for the first 3 people that do, because I really do, want to, honor people that take action. We will send you the bonus, which is the Growth Engine scorecard that our program members use. And when you're tracking things, you ideally want to have a traffic light system. And that I can just highlight here. For our program members that are using this, then they can see red light, green light, yellow light. Are we on track, off track, or at risk? And then you can really see the areas of your business that need your time and attention. And it's super powerful. And we'll also send you the Healthy Pipeline Protocol. All right, that's it, guys. I appreciate your time. And now we'll hit the Q&A.
All right, man. Thank you. So, like I said, if you have a specific question, you can type it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and then I can unmute you. I do have a question while we're waiting to see if anyone drops one in. So the scorecard that you're talking about, we're starting to implement a customer intake form where we, any lead that comes in, walks in, because a lot of the online marketing will drive walk-in traffic, calls, obviously. We want them to fill this out when someone walks in. And then, but I guess my question is, it sounds great in theory, but how do you actually put something like that, like the scorecard that you were talking about, into motion so people actually use it and not just,
Yeah, sure. So for the scorecard, I mean, it is one of those things that it does take a little bit of a habit to implement. The few key pro tips. So the first thing to answer your question is the best way that we're talking about is to automate and get rid of as much manual labor as possible.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a lead form or a internal form that when somebody walks in the showroom, you have your sales team make sure that they put like lead source, right? Came from, they heard about us on Google.
Yeah.
Okay. And now it was a showroom walk-in. Okay, cool. I mean, ideally that can populate in the CRM or at the very least into your Google Sheet. And for those that are Ninja can plug that into their main scorecard. But for simplicity, we have clients that they're like, that's too much tech for me. And essentially that's where the bookend mechanism comes in, right? So they can use that lead form that you're talking about, and a lot of our clients that use something similar, But at the end of day report, you were super busy. Sales team just put, I had 3 walk-ins today. Okay, cool. Right? If on
Yeah.
the end of day report, you wanted to have like, okay, well, where did people hear about us? Okay, they could also fill that in at the end of day report. That data goes in, sales manager or owner gets that. They can have that visibility. And ideally, we have a lot of our clients and program members that'll just hire a VA to go through and just update that scorecard so they
Okay.
don't have to deal with it and they can have that visibility because usually automations won't solve it all.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think was it Nicole that raised her hand? I saw a hand raised there by Nicole earlier.
Yeah, let me see.
Our noobs to the Zoom meeting. So the Q&A thingy, I don't even know how that one worked.
Yeah, I don't see any in there, and you could type them into the comments, but I don't see Nicole anymore. She might have jumped off.
Cool. We can reach out to you directly. If you get this recording, we'll reach out to you directly and we'll see what question you have.
Yeah, I think I saw a couple of comments. People are like you said, they're busy watching this, but they're going to watch the replay, which usually happens. I do have one more question. I think it's interesting how you talk about like the texting to the owner or maybe a sales manager for accountability. Did you ever, like when you work with shops and they implement something like that, do you ever get pushback where like the owner doesn't want texts or vice versa, the sales reps don't want to text them? I mean, I guess if that's their job, they have to do it, but like, did you see some pushback with that
I
tactic?
mean, yeah, I would say like the rule of what is it, the rule of thumb here. I mean, and again, if there are any sales reps on this, I don't mean to knock you personally. We kind of assume to be sales managers and business owners, and that's usually now who we're working with. Usually you'll get pushback on everything, but then you likely have the wrong person in that seat.
Okay.
So, that's a way to put that in part of their job description, roles, and responsibilities to revamp that, put that part of the performance review, keep them accountable with it. Because, yeah, you're going to get pushback on everything.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you'll have to hold them accountable. You'll have to, follow up with them in the daily huddle to be like, hey, calling you out. Didn't get yours yesterday. Are you committed to sending that today? Okay, cool. What was your blocker? Why didn't you do that? And what can we do to support you with that? So, yeah. And then from the business owners, no, all the business owners were like, in all honesty, some of them were like, they're not going to look at it till next morning to really like go through it
Yeah.
and put that in there. But it was the mechanism in of itself of people having to be like, no outbound calls,
Yeah.
prospecting, didn't go and see any kitchen and bath dealers. I have a list and I didn't do that. It really moves the needle. So even
Yeah.
if
I would,
yeah.
yeah, I'd imagine if you didn't do that, it's like, I don't want to send this text, but if that's what you have to do, but yeah, exactly. It helps get
Okay,
people
Nicole
to,
said no hand raised. I see that we've got like 17 people still on here. If you guys don't have questions right off the top, and you're still on here and you're getting some value, and Stephen doesn't have another question, I would say I would go through some of the mechanisms that I think you can apply to not only sales, your meetings, anywhere in the business you're trying to get, your team to buy in or your team to take action to adopt a behavior or to stop a behavior. I would be interested in jamming on that in the last few minutes that we have. If anybody's interested, drop a 1 in the chat again if you're interested in that because you're still here. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, I'm just going to talk about that visual scoreboard because if you do nothing else, just get that and you'll see significant success. That was one of the biggest things that moved the needle for that case study I showed you. And I'm just going to share with you guys some of the things that really moved the needle there. Number one, in terms of mechanisms, the scoreboard itself, an old school bell. That was a big one. When they would do in their sales sprints, you guys might have saw in the time blocks, we had a thing called sales sprints. And when people would make a sale, because they did an outbound call, they would ring the bell. It would help to create a culture of a little bit of fun, excitement. They'd ring the bell. The other thing that they got was like a CrossFit timer, which you can find on Amazon, because everybody hates meetings. Nobody wants to come to them. And they put that up there. So when they did the daily huddle for the visual scoreboard, the 15-minute daily huddle CrossFit timer was on. And at the end, it's over. If you guys have ever experienced this, people don't like meetings. And what often happens is you get a lot of crosstalk. Didn't see any ones in the chat. Okay, I'm going to assume that nobody's logged off, that they're still finding this valuable. So I'm still going to share until Stephen kicks us out. Probably 2 minutes, guys, and then we'll jump off.
Yeah, keep
Because
going.
this is where the gold is. Systems are great, getting people to use them, whole nother thing. There's probably a number of you guys in here that have leads in your pipeline from marketing that are never called back. And then you're like, oh, marketing doesn't work. And I can tell you it works. But it's getting to actually use the system, use the CRM, follow up with the leads, all of that stuff. So this is the gold. And I appreciate that you guys are still here. Is if you've ever had your team, really come away from meetings and was like, that was totally ineffective, waste of time. Sarah just ate up all the time complaining about that. And then everybody jumped in and everybody was talking about things that are not important. When our program members were vocalizing that, we dropped them. We came up with a solution on the spot, found them on Amazon and dropped that to them, which were these football flags, right? So you got your yellow flag on the play. It's that if somebody's in the meeting, does crosstalk, is kind of going off track, they throw the yellow flag, right? It's a visual, it's fun. People keep each other accountable. For that client that was in the UK, they play football. So they had the yellow card, red card. One infraction, yellow card, you interrupt the meeting and you're off track. Red card, you're out of the meeting. You got to leave. So I leave that with you guys to come up with creative mechanisms in your business in general to get your team to buy in, make it fun, make it visual, and you'll really be able to move the needle. I appreciate you guys' time. And thank you,
Awesome.
Stephen.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much. Thanks for jumping on here. We'll get the recording out to everyone. I know a lot of people wanted to watch the recording. They emailed us that they couldn't attend and wanted to watch the recording. So we'll get that out. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, connect with Justin at his calendar link. And that's about it. Have a good day, everyone.
All right, guys. Have an awesome day.
See you later. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Countertop Success Podcast, and make sure you head over and subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, and all the other major podcast platforms. Now, if you're looking to grow the retail side of your countertop business outside of word of mouth and referrals, then go over to our website at countertopmarketingco.com and book a free strategy call with me. Also, when you're on our site, check out our free training section and you'll find a ton of helpful resources that you can use to help grow your countertop business. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next show.